The Tudor court was a theater of shadows, a stage where the drama of power and ambition played out under the watchful eyes of the king, where ambition wore a velvet glove over a mailed fist, concealing ruthless intent beneath layers of silk and ceremony. Every smile was a calculation, a carefully constructed facade designed to mask true intentions and gain an advantage. Every whispered word a potential dagger, capable of destroying reputations and ending lives with equal ease. Power shifted like sand, and survival meant mastering the silent language of intrigue, learning to read between the lines and anticipate the next treacherous move. Men and women glided through torchlit halls, their footsteps echoing the secrets they carried. Each a player in a deadly game for the king's favor, a prize more valuable than gold or land. The king, Henry VIII, was the sun around which this universe revolved, the source of all light and warmth, but also capable of casting the darkest shadows. His moods dictated the fate of all, from the highest noble to the lowliest servant. A frown could spell ruin, a swift descent from grace and into the tower. A glance could elevate a nobody to dizzying heights, transforming their life overnight. Allegiances were fragile, loyalty a commodity bought and sold, traded for power, influence, and survival. Every action was scrutinized. Choice of color a poem, a dance partner. All messages to be decoded, analyzed, and interpreted for hidden meanings. The stakes were impossibly high. The court was both the source of all power and the most dangerous place in England. A gilded cage where fortunes could be made and lives destroyed in an instant. Tension simmered beneath the music and laughter. A constant undercurrent of fear and ambition. A predator's den where one wrong move could make you prey. A single misstep leading to ruin and oblivion. Families rose and fell on rumor, fortunes made and lost on the king's whim, their destinies hanging precariously in the balance. Henry's desperation for a male heir made the court hold its breath, each member acutely aware of the implications for their own future, waiting for the next move, the next decree, the next sign of favor or displeasure from the king. They did not have to wait long. The court buzzed with anticipation, whispers echoing through the halls. Then, she arrived. Anne Boleyn, a name that would soon be on everyone's lips, a woman destined to change the course of history. Unlike the demure English roses, carefully cultivated in the sheltered gardens of the aristocracy, Anne was forged in the sophisticated and often ruthless courts of France and Burgundy. She absorbed the nuances of power, the art of diplomacy, and the subtle language of seduction. She returned to England, not as the naive girl who had left, but as a woman of sharp intellect and undeniable wit, her dark eyes missing nothing, observing everything. She understood the game of courtly love and political maneuvering. Her presence was captivating, drawing attention like a moth to a flame. Her confidence bordered on arrogance, a trait rarely seen or tolerated in women of the time. She could debate scholars on matters of theology and philosophy, holding her own against the most learned men in the kingdom, dance with grace and elegance, captivating all who watched, and trade barbs with seasoned courtiers, holding her own in the viper's nest of courtly politics. Anne challenged those around her, refusing to be a mere ornament, a pretty face to be admired and then discarded. She had ambitions, desires, and a will of her own. When Henry's gaze, so accustomed to obedience and admiration, fell upon her, he saw not just beauty, but a mind as quick as his own, a spirit that dared to challenge him. He expected an easy conquest, as he had enjoyed with so many others, but Anne had learned from her sister Mary's disgrace, witnessing the fleeting nature of royal favor. She refused him, not with a flat denial that would have been easily dismissed, but with a subtle, intelligent game, a dance of flirtation and resistance. Her virtue was not for sale. She would not be a royal mistress, another name whispered in the shadows, easily discarded when a new fancy struck the king. She presented herself as worthy of respect, of genuine admiration, not just fleeting desire. She demanded to be seen as an equal, a partner, not a plaything. Instead of extinguishing Henry's interest, her refusal only fanned it into a raging fire, an obsession that would consume the court and change the very fabric of England. To deny the king was unthinkable, a dangerous game to play, but Anne's audacity only made her more irresistible, more alluring in his eyes. The game had truly begun, a high-stakes match of wills that would determine the fate of a kingdom. Henry, unaccustomed to waiting, was captivated by Anne's refusal. He began a relentless campaign, showering her with gifts and, most powerfully, with words. In secret, impassioned letters, the king laid his soul bare, transforming himself from sovereign to supplicant. These were not formal royal missives, but raw, desperate confessions of obsession. He promised marriage, poured out frustration over his stalled annulment, and sent tokens of his devotion. Each letter bound him tighter to Anne, making her more than a passing fancy. The language was one of conquest, yet it was Henry who was conquered. With every line, Anne's strategy worked. He was caught in a web of his own making. The foundation of her future throne was built, brick by brick, with his own hand. Anne's strategy was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Her weapon was chastity, wielded with skill. She kept Henry close, yet always just out of reach. She granted him her company and wit, letting him believe victory was near, then pulled away. For nearly 7 years she made him wait, transforming lust into obsession. Anne became a prize he had to win at any cost, not just for pleasure, but to prove his power. Publicly, she was at his side, displacing Queen Catherine in all but name. This public performance trapped Henry, making retreat impossible without losing face. Her resistance was active, forcing him to escalate his efforts to make her queen. She introduced him to radical religious ideas, reshaping his worldview. Anne's chastity was the lever with which she moved the world. The king was now fighting for more than love. He was fighting for his soul and his legacy. Henry's obsession, a consuming fire, began to dictate the course of a nation. It was a desire that would reshape England forever. It became the engine of a revolution, a seismic shift that reverberated through every corner of Tudor England. The very foundations of the kingdom were about to be tested. His quest for an annulment from Catherine, a woman who had been his queen for decades, consumed him and his kingdom, threatening to tear apart the very fabric of English society. It was a dangerous game he was playing. The Pope, under the thumb of Catherine's powerful nephew, the Holy Roman Emperor, found himself in an impossible position and ultimately refused to grant it, setting the stage for an unprecedented act of defiance. Anne's influence and radical texts, whispering promises of power and freedom, fueled Henry's defiance. Why should a king bow to Rome? Why should his desires be subject to the whims of a foreign power? The desire for Anne became inextricably entwined with the intoxicating idea of national sovereignty, a vision of England unbound. To have her, to secure his legacy, Henry broke with 1,000 years of tradition, a bond that had defined England's place in the world. He boldly declared himself supreme head of the Church of England, a move that sent shockwaves across Europe. Monasteries were dissolved, their wealth seized to fill the royal coffers. Dissenters were executed, their voices silenced in the name of the king's will. And the English Reformation was born, not from theological conviction, but from the all-consuming power of obsession. An entire country was torn from its spiritual roots, its identity forever altered by one man's desire. All for a woman, for the allure of her charm, and the promise of a male heir to secure the Tudor dynasty. Anne, with her sharp wit and unwavering ambition, convinced Henry it was not just his right but his divine duty. He shattered his kingdom's faith, its traditions, its very soul, all to win her hand in marriage. The price for a kiss, for a moment of passion, was nothing less than the soul of a nation. The world had irrevocably changed, and there was no turning back to the old ways, the old allegiances. All eyes now turned to Anne, the enigmatic woman for whom England had been utterly remade, a queen who had rewritten history. In 1533, Anne Boleyn achieved her goal, married and crowned Queen of England. Pregnant, she wore the St. Edward's crown, symbolizing unprecedented power. But her victory was hollow. The people saw her as an interloper, not a beloved queen. Her power depended on producing a male heir, the unspoken bargain with Henry. In September, she gave birth not to a son, but to a daughter, Elizabeth. The disappointment was profound. The first crack in her foundation appeared. Anne reveled in her role, championing the arts and religious reform, but made powerful enemies. Her sharp tongue and political influence alienated many, including Thomas Cromwell. She was a queen without public affection, her throne built on shifting sands. The pressure mounted as she failed to deliver a son. Anne's triumph was shadowed by isolation and growing danger. The court that once envied her now watched for her fall. The crown she wore was as heavy as it was golden. Anne's failure to produce a son gnawed at her marriage. Miscarriages followed, and Henry's love curdled into suspicion and anger. The qualities that once captivated him now irritated. The thrill of the chase was gone. Jane Seymour, meek and gentle, rose at court. Everything Anne was not. Anne's enemies, led by Thomas Cromwell, saw their chance. Whispers of her fall replaced those of her rise. Cromwell masterminded her destruction, building a case from flirtations and careless words. She was accused of adultery with 5 men, including her brother. Monstrous fabricated charges. Her friends were arrested. The net tightened swiftly. Anne, once the king's obsession, was now utterly alone. She became a prisoner in the very tower where she had awaited her coronation. The game was nearly over. Anne's fall was swift and brutal. Arrested and taken to the tower, she faced charges of adultery, incest, and treason. A checkmate with no escape. The men accused with her were tortured or coerced. Their trials were shams. Anne's own trial was political theater. She denied every charge, facing her accusers with courage. The verdict was decided before it began. It was the king's will. Sentenced to death, Henry granted her a swordsman from Calais for a swift end. Their marriage was annulled, her title stripped, her daughter declared a bastard. On May 19, 1536, Anne walked to the scaffold, composed and dignified. She addressed the crowd, asking them to pray for the king. With a single stroke, her life ended. The obsession that reshaped a nation was extinguished in blood. The day after, Henry was betrothed to Jane Seymour. The game had a new queen. Anne's story was over, but her legacy was just beginning. Henry had his victory, a new wife, and soon, a son. Yet Anne's ghost would haunt him in England forever. He broke with 1,000 years of faith, declared himself head of a new church, and executed saints and nobles, all for Anne. The irony. He destroyed the woman he'd changed the world to possess. The English Reformation was born not from grand vision, but from a king's lust and a woman's ambition. Anne played the most dangerous game and, for a moment, won. She paid the ultimate price, a victim of the man she sought to control. But her legacy endures, not as a tragic queen, but as the woman who forced a king's hand and set England on a new course. Her spirit lived on in her daughter Elizabeth I, who would become one of England's greatest monarchs. In the end, it was Anne's bloodline and her spirit that defined the future.